Hey guys, what is going on? It's your boy Fallen here for Sputnik Entertainment, and today I want to talk about what actually goes into making these videos, which is the gear that is involved. Now, I've had opportunities to work with hundreds upon hundreds pieces of gear over the past decade, and I've had some of the worst experiences with gear and some of the best experiences. Now, I love talking gear. I'm a giant gearhead, and whenever I meet another photographer or videographer, I love talking to them about the bodies that they use, the lenses, the accessories. This is why I love attending major photo and video events. Hopefully we have a chance to do that this year as well and talk shop with people. Now, I remember when I was transitioning from online radio world into photo video world, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was buying a lot of horrible gear, and it's a mistake that oftentimes beginning photographers and videographers make, and then they spend money on bad gear and then they have to replace it, or they buy cheap gear and it breaks and then they have to rebuying it. And I made those mistakes both over the years, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I remember the first year in one of the first major events I got into the photo/video world, I had to buy some photography and videography gear, and I actually went into Kmart and bought myself a point and shoot camera. And out of all the brands in the world, it was a GE point and shoot camera. Now, I wish I still had it. I think I sold it or gave it away. I know a lot of photographers and videographers still treasure their first piece of gear. I wish I had it, but I do not, which is a bit of a blessing in disguise. Now, when you think of camera gear or video gear, you don't think of GE. You think of dishwashers and ovens and appliances, but apparently at some point in time, they were making camera gear, or they may have just licensed themselves to some Chinese company, because that camera was horrible. It had horrible delays when using zoom. It had horrible autofocus tracking associated with it. Everything could be wrong with the camera. It's like a camera that you buy on Walmart or on Amazon right now for 40 bucks. But at that point in time, I spent about $180 to $200 for it. And for me, starting out, not making any money in that industry was not a small chunk of change. So I understand that if you're interested in getting photography, want to get into videography, you're balling on a budget. And I know what it's like, because I bought that kind of gear and I had to replace it over time. And sadly, that's the barrier to entry when it comes to it. Now, the barrier to entry has calmed down over time, because over time I switched over to my first DSLR camera, which was Canon T5, and then I got a Canon T5i, which the difference between the two, if I remember correctly at that point in time, one of the major differences, the I had a microphone input. I'm not sure if I is supposed to be the mic of it, or it was branded fully different, but not most Canon, I think all Canon bodies, especially on the DSLR/mirrorless side, have a mic input on them. And I remember how excited I was to get that Canon T5. And I remember showing my mom how you can switch lenses and how one comes off, and you can put on different lenses and how they have different functionalities. But still, it's considered to be a kid camera, and was about $500, $600. But I also know what it's like to deal with crappy adapters like this Vivitar. Now, this is a Vivitar wide angle lens adapter. Now, these go for about $8 to $10 on Amazon or B&H, and these are considered to be horrible. I learned over the years that these are doing more job of a paperweight than versus gear. But they also have an appeal for beginning photographers that cannot buy an expensive adapter, that they can't buy themselves an expensive microphone. I'm using a lab setup right now. It's not the fanciest lab setup, but I remember when I first was getting started, I would buy Pyle lavalier setups. Now, I understood what I had to do, that the shotgun microphone or onboard microphone off the camera would not work very well for what I was doing, and I had to get myself a lavalier setup, but the budget constraints prevented me from being able to afford that. Now, there is more and more options now for budget or prosumer options that are not as horrible as cheap Chinese things that will break after you touch them wrong. But still, there's a lot of issues. And one of the bigger issues when concerning buying cheap gear is the resale value. Now, I had opportunities to buy gear, sell gears, trade gear over the years. And one of the biggest things that if you buy cheap piece of gear, you're not going to be able to resell it 99% of the time because it already doesn't have a lot of value associated with it. Versus, let's say, if you buy a nice piece of gear like Rode, Sennheiser, any Gitzo for tripods, or Manfrotto, that you're investing a lot of money into that gear, but a lot of that gear holds that value over time. I've bought gear that for over $1,000, and then years later I resold it for about $700 to $800. So if you think about it, it only dropped about 20% of its value over years. I think its depreciation of it is one of the best in the market if you think about compared to a car or other stuff that might have depreciation. Some gear actually appreciates in value that becomes discontinued, and they don't make that type of equipment anymore. Now, one of the more prosumer companies out there on the market is Neewer. It's definitely better than buying really cheap generic gear, but it also doesn't have the most functionality. And as you start working on more complex projects, so if you decide to start making, you want to make money off photography or videography, you do need more in-depth tools to make better content, especially if you start working on commercial projects or with events, or if you start charging your rate, versus something like this, which is very simple: battery pack, and then you have a ring adapter associated with it, and you have options of left, right, or all lights. It doesn't have temperature control, it doesn't have a lot of functionality, it doesn't have a softbox options, but it costs about $30. So for something like this, it's not bad, but it's also not going to suit you long term. Now, keep in mind, if you're just interested in doing it as a hobbyist and you just want to go out and take some pictures, there's nothing wrong with buying gear like that. I know some people that don't want to spend time learning all the gear in the world. And that kind of goes into another point I want to make, is that I recommend that instead of going out and spending $7,000, $10,000, $12,000 in one day, which for most videographers and photographers is not feasible. If you talk to any photographers or videographers over time, most of us bought gear over many, many years, and this is why we could say that we have so-and-so gear. And sometimes people ask me, oh, how much is your rig? And I tell them how much it is, and they look at me with wide eyes, but they oftentimes don't understand. I've spent years and years and years collecting this gear, and it's not like I just took out my daddy's black card, went to B&H, Adorama, or your equivalent, and bought all this gear. And which goes back to the point I was trying to make, is that I enjoy buying gear piece by piece and seeing how it fits my setup, seeing how it fits that rig, learning what all the buttons do, what all the functionalities do, how it should be set up, how it should be mounted, what kind of accessories will help it work down term, versus going to a store, swiping out your card and being overwhelmed with all the gear and having to spend the next 6 months reading the manuals of how it will all go together. So most of the gear I have nowadays, you can wake me up in the middle of the night and I would be able to do a run and gun setup in less than 5 minutes. But that's my biggest advice. Now, another issue is that I mentioned is that the customer support is non-existent. If you buy gear that is very, very cheap and you try to reach out for some sort of a customer support, if it's outside of the sales window, you're not going to get that kind of support. Versus if you use an established company like Sennheiser, Rode, Canon, Sony, Manfrotto, whomever, have manufacturer support, which is amazing. Now, I haven't had a need to use manufacturer support too many times, but the times I did have to reach out to these companies, they were more than willing to offer their assistance. Now, the main reason I didn't have to reach out to them is that because they make quality gear that lasts a very, very long time. Now, over time, I had opportunities to work with amazing companies like GlideCam. I remember a number of years back, I met them at NAB, and then shortly afterwards I was flying to Dominican Republic to shoot a couple resorts with them, and we partnered with them, and which is the GlideCam XR Pro that I have on my lap right now. And we shot a lot of content with them. And keep in mind, I've had this GlideCam for about 6 years now, and it's in borderline pristine condition. And trust me, this has been in my suitcase, it's been in road bags, it's been everywhere, and it works 100% how it used to be. Now, I would love to work with them this year. Now, and they also have a very popular model, which is the Devin Graham version of it, and we had an opportunity to interview Devin Graham at NAB, so check out that video if you guys want to check that out. So eventually, like I said, we started working with companies and having opportunities to get some gear to use this way. What's the biggest point I'm getting to? Is that I recommend that for people who are interested in getting into photography, videography, not rush and not just buy the gear that they think they need. Do research, do your homework, and I'm always trying to help out the community. Sometimes I meet people at events, sometimes people reach out to me on social media or in the comments on YouTube, and I do my best to get back to everybody. So let me know what kind of a setup you guys are using. This is a bit of a rambly / tangent video. I just want to talk about gear. I love gear. I think I will always be a gearhead, but tomorrow I want to give you guys a bit of a story time about one camera store that I've never bought gear with. This was this past year, and I had to get a new shotgun microphone because my old one died, and I wanted to upgrade my lavalier setup because we were doing some interviews with some high-profile individuals. And I came across this company because it was in advertising on Instagram, and I called them up. I'm like, hey, I need this, this, and this. It was about close to $1,000 I spent with them. I had to spend about $200 in shipping to get it overnighted from California. Long story short, less than 2 weeks later, 2 out of the 3 pieces of gear stopped working, and one of them is actually acting up. Now, I'm not going to be mentioning the company by name because this might actually be a legal issue, and I'll talk about that tomorrow because I want to do a little gear mini series. Speaking of gear, if there's any gear that you guys would want us to check out this year, any particular gear or some company, please let us know. If you're a company or brand that want to work with us, please feel free to reach out to me on socials or shoot us an email. Hopefully this kind of gives you guys a little bit of a better feel about gear, maybe more understanding, maybe gives you more ideas. I enjoyed making this video, and I think that's the concept behind it, is that you gotta have fun with it. Photography and videography is all about having fun, all going out, having an amazing time. Gear is only a part of it. It's supposed to do a job, but as long as it does the job for you, you should go out and just make content. Anyways, guys, if you want to stay in touch with me, check me out on social media, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.